Hello and welcome to the Daily News. Hello and welcome to the Daily News for Toronto, well, for Torontonians, for Thursday, the 7th of February, 2019. Just going to go through some news from Thursday and then catch up with some of the other news from the last few days that I didn't really cover that much. So, number one, so the Eglinton Crosstown Express situation has been, of course, causing trouble for businesses along that spot. So councillors are going to consider relief for those businesses. Some kind of bill to help them out. A passenger with this cabbie in Durham got pulled over for totally drunk driving all over the place, and I actually had a passenger in the back seat at the time. The NYPD wants Google to stop including like user submitted information about enforcement details, like where a traffic trap is and stuff, speed traps and stuff are on Waze on their navigation app. SNC-Lavalin and the Liberal government are sort of embroiled in this like corruption cover-up right now, and so it's Lavalin is like the biggest, company of its kind in Canada. It's kind of a too big to fail situation. So the Liberal government's getting in trouble over basically covering up this too big to fail situation when Lavalin was messing around, and also Lavalin was made a whole bunch of like illegal campaign contributions to the Liberals. So it's just. You always suspect there's something dirty about this Liberal government, and this is one of the dirty things. So, meanwhile, Virginia is so racist and sexist that the governor, the guy who would replace him if he had to leave, and the guy that would replace that guy, are all not really viable candidates for. So, the governor and the two people who could possibly replace him are all embroiled in like racist and sexist bullshit right now. CBC manages to text-explain social engineering hacks to the Canadian public on the National, and they have a great suggestion for us that we should have security questions with the wrong answers. So when they ask, what's your mother's maiden name? Oh, shoot, I think I actually did that, and that's why I can't remember what the answer was. But so companies are getting in trouble for having stupid security questions that allow people to gain access to your account, such as, what is your mother's maiden name? Well, that's easy for anyone to find out. So anyway, the Vancouver coroner has confirmed that during this extreme rush of opioid-related deaths in the Vancouver area, most people have been dying in their homes, not like in alleyways and stuff like that, and nobody's died at the supervised injection sites. CBC has they did this nice interview on the National with this Grammy-nominated producer or something, musician, who put together this kick-ass album with a whole bunch of like Jewish folk songs. From like old school like Russian oppression type of days, and they recorded this really kick-ass album, and the interview is really interesting too, so I recommend checking that out. Meanwhile, on APTN, Nation to Nation does a pretty good coverage of this new energy bill that's about big energy projects and stuff. Oop. It is noon. The APTN story, they ran a story about Indigenous energy workers and the conflicts that they have, sort of social conflicts that they have with other people on reserve and stuff. And it really, just to give you a little cursory sort of it really sounds a lot like the kind of divisions that come into play between, family members of settlers as well, where you've got, environmentalist kids and their parents who are in the energy sector or something like that, or you got brothers and sisters going separate ways on pollution and sovereignty and whatever. So this is a really nice counter to the stories in the other mainstream press, other network news, that is kind of about highlighting the other side of the less harmonious kind of divisions, and how and really glorifying the people who indigenous people who become energy industry workers. So it's a nice counter to that, and it's a little bit more down to earth. That's basically my news roundup for Thursday. It's very spotty, very incomprehensive, not comprehensive, but I wanted to do a little catch up from the last week. So I wanted to just so Snoop Dogg's weed, he's putting out this brand of weed, and his branding is basically spoofing the Maple Leafs with the spelling and everything like that, and sort of the artwork. It's all a spoof of the Maple Leafs branding. Remax has done this study that says single millennials are not in that much debt, and they're not interested in getting into the housing market and getting into being. So we don't owe mortgage monies, and we're not interested in mortgages. Basically, we're interested in house ownership, but we can't get it. So we're not interested in home ownership because we're not interested in mortgages. So the first generation who is not willing to pretend that mortgages are the same as a purchase or a replacement for a purchase. The CTV ran this story about somebody, like people having their cars stolen while they're left running and unattended in the driveway and like unlocked. And it's just it's a good sort of little reminder, like you've got to not be low-hanging fruit for thieves. It's really it can be really misleading in terms of the amount of theft going on. It really seems like there's more just because of the techniques that people are using, where they're sort of going out fishing. Like people are just walking around different neighborhoods looking for cars with nobody in them that are running, and you can just easily walk up past a car, and if somebody comes out, you can be like, oh, hey, I saw your car unattended, so I was gonna, because this is how people steal cars, so I was gonna come and up until it's very easy to do it. So even if not that many people can do a lot of damage that way. These days in Toronto, the rivers, because of all this like freezing and melting, the rivers and like ravines and stuff, and you might not notice this if you never go down there, but the banks in some places, the whole floodplains, are going to be covered in ice flow. So a good place to see this sometimes is at Old Mill near Bloor and Jane, like Bloor west of Jane, just on the east side of the Humber River, to the north basically of Bloor. There's Old Mill Road or something, and then it's on the west side of the river. There's a TTC station, but so it's a good, interesting thing to check out if you want to take weird pictures or have a weird time. But if you end up being blocked off by something like that when you're trying to actually get somewhere, let's say on your bike or on foot, jogging, whatever, walking your dog, take the forest. Just go further away from the water, and because it's all up a hill, so somewhere there will be some spot where you'll probably find some path that is the detour path. So that's my little thing for that. So this Alberta Indigenous drumming and singing group, this band, right? It's a drumming group, drum circle, I don't know, is getting this Grammy nomination, and they are so poor that they're gonna like struggle to afford the trip. But their music kicks ass. The young spirit singers, and so they're like having to get support to afford to be able to go there. It just shows like it shows something. So City News is also on this big anti-socializing tip about teens on social media and how terrible it is, basically telling teens like don't talk to each other, watch TV, and call each other, text each other, and watch TV. I think I think it's propaganda in that direction. So So I wanted to talk about the infamous Toyota terrorist connection, or the Toyota Hilux terrorist connection. And just to say, it's more of a regular armies direction. So every once in a while, the press and American politicians and the press will do a whole bunch of kind of uninformed whinging about like, why does ISIS and the Taliban and all of these like insurgent armies, as in like terrorist armies, have so many Toyota Land Cruisers and Hilux pickups, especially of all types, but all the way from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and current models and stuff. How are they getting access to these vehicles, and et cetera, et cetera? And I find this sort of funny in a couple of different ways. Number one, because it's kind of like you're denying that the Middle East is eminently permeable by vehicles on many sides, like all the way through. Like you can bring vehicles in and out, just like you can. So there's always a way to get, but there's never been a time when there hasn't been a whole bunch of Toyota vehicles in that area, and it's not. So there's a few different reasons for the Toyota connection. It's just because Toyota, they for the longest time, these like Hilux and Land Cruiser things, they were the models that had the most interchangeable and available parts, period, and that were heavy duty and that were super reliable, and that's it, period. If you look at the rebel army on Bougainville, which is just it's a small, it's basically just a battalion, I guess, of local militia, and they've got the same type of vehicles. They're running them all off of coconut diesel, and that they make themselves. All the parts, they can machine them. They're all interchangeable. So it's not like there's no surprise why they would. There's no real connection, but American politicians keep trying to like investigate Toyota as if Toyota is supplying the Taliban and ISIS, like knowingly, as in being like a weapons supplier, because what the deal is like insurgent forces can't go out and get Humvees that have 50 cals on them, like anybody else can buy. So if you have a good working relationship with the United States, and you have a regular army with a formal army that's like internationally recognized enough, you can just buy Humvees and whatever. So everybody just buys Humvees, and they come with 50 cals attached on the top. But if you happen to be from some country that doesn't manufacture those, and you are also in need of them, it's the same thing for if you're trying to equip your own, like the Afghan National Police Force and stuff, they are using the same vehicles. So although even the formal armies of a lot of countries will up-arm these things with these big Dishka machine guns, which are these old Russian machine guns. They're the equivalent of what the Americans still use as like their machine gun of choice for vehicle mounted and like stationary big heavy machine guns. And these are the things that will kill you even if they don't hit you. Like if the bullet goes past you, it'll singe your whole face off and whatever. So they're used for attacking vehicles and buildings and stuff like that, but also for infantry or whatever. But so Americans and whoever purchases stuff off the Americans are the biggest arms dealers in the world and arms manufacturers. So whoever's part of that channel gets the M16s or whatever the American weapons, including the Humvees and stuff like that, and including the 50 cal machine guns for emplacements and for vehicles. So they get all these formal ones, and then everybody else just gets Toyotas and these old Russian Dishkas, because whether you've captured them from some formal force, or whether you've just built them from stuff that you found, or whether you used to be part of some formal army that was fighting the Russians back in the day and captured a hell of a lot of their stuff, and then just attached it to all of the scrap pickups that you bought off of farmers who just bought them because they're the best farm pickups out there. So there's already there's no, I don't know. It's so funny to see politicians and the press trying to acting like there's a big mystery as to how the Taliban or ISIS would have easy access to these vehicles. And then also why they would consistently pick the Toyotas, and the Hilux particularly, and the Land Cruiser particularly, because all you have to do is watch videos of American car nuts, and automotive hobbyists who have managed to get their hands on these 70s, especially the 70s Hilux pickups, because these are the classic Dishka techies. And by Dishka techie, I mean it's the pickup that has one of these machine guns mounted to it with a turret that you can swing around and stuff like that. So this is one of the main weapons, and so it's techies versus Hummers, and the Hummers are slower and they're better armored, but other than that, they're pretty much equivalent. Like, so all over the world, those are the vehicles on either side. And sometimes people will up armor the techies and stuff too, with putting extra armor and stuff on it and shields and whatever. Because the Hilux pickups can actually be modded to work better under those conditions than the Hummers. This is part of the thing, is like, even in forces that could get Hummers or do have Hummers, they don't always want them because they kind of suck, especially the up-armored Hummers, because they fail all the time and they didn't really reinforce the suspension and stuff enough to accommodate the extra weight from the armor. So you're either cruising around in this kind of IED magnet that is really a big target, and you can't go far without it breaking down, and it's not armored enough to withstand like a lot of the stuff that you face, if you've got a Hummer, or you've got the up armored one, which is slow, and the suspension's going to break down on you, and then you're still going to get shot at, but at least you're going to have more armor to support you. And I'm getting into this in a super geeky way, but basically there's no, I don't think there's any reason to suspect some corporate conspiracy about Toyota or some brand supporting ISIS. Like, it's just so easy for anyone to just buy cars. Like, buying cars is the easiest thing in the world that you could possibly do. And it's so funny to see North American press pretending like it would be different in the Middle East than it would be here to buy pickups. Just imagine if there was some kind of militia rebellion or militia arms race or something in the Americas. Anybody would be able to get these big machine guns, or the sort of medium-sized ones, and anybody would be able to get a whole bunch of Hilux pickups. So you could do exactly the same thing in the States. You could do the same thing in Canada. You could do the same thing in Mexico. Anywhere in South America, you could do the same thing, and that's what you would buy. You'd be like, shit, we have to get all the Hiluxes we can find. Because if you watch these videos, YouTube videos that these car enthusiasts post about the Hilux trucks that they've bought and they've modified and stuff like that, it's obvious. It's just the most utility-oriented utility pickup ever that's, mass-produced, easily available and stuff. Like, it's the one. Whether you're running a farm or a construction company or whatever you're doing, it's the Hilux or the Land Cruiser. So anyway, I wanted to do one long segment on that just to bury it, because it's just a funny little piece of sort of corporate, like weird corporate political war stuff, where another piece I want to do is about how the bicycle is this sort of war machine historically, and nobody really realizes that. There's this sort of unknown history of the bicycle as being part of wars and supply lines and logistics, but also attack and stuff. And so in a war-oriented society, in a vehicle-oriented society, I think that bears a little bit of mention. And so I'm just going to leave it at that and wish everybody a very happy Friday. TGIF.